Sofía Morales had spent the better part of her adult life navigating ghosts. They haunted the mildewed files of the military archives, whispered from the yellowed newspaper clippings in her office, and settled heavily in the silence whenever her mother spoke of her father, Commander Hector Morales. To the world, Hector was a hero, one of the 14 elite soldiers of the 37th Infantry, lost in a disastrous, officially unexplained ambush in the Sierra Norte of Oaxaca 40 years ago. To Sofía, he was a question mark encased in granite, a memory defined by an unshakable sense of falsehood. She was now a historian, a profession she'd chosen not for love of the past, but for the chance to excavate one specific painful moment of it. She sat at her desk in Mexico City, the neon glare of the capital mocking the silence of her work. She had just finished drafting another fruitless FOIA request when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar, untraceable number from the depths of Oaxaca state. "Is this the commander's daughter?" The voice was a dry rattle, like stones shifting in parched earth, heavy with the accent of the mountains. Sofía froze. No one called him the commander anymore. "Who is this?" "My name is Elías Rivera. They called me El Cachorro. I was with your father. I'm the last one left, and I'm dying." The line crackled with static and urgency. Elías. Elías El Cachorro Rivera. The name was legend among the families, a survivor who had vanished a year after the incident, rumored to have gone mad or been silenced, forever enshrined in the whispers of those who refused to accept the official story. He was one of the 2 men who had returned, only to be immediately discharged and disappear, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding report of a devastating ambush. You know the truth," Sofía whispered, her hand tightening around the phone. It wasn't a question. "The truth is a mountain, Nina. It crushes the ones who climb it. We made a pact, a sacred pact, but the weight. After 40 years, the mountain is coming down on me. I need to get rid of it before I go." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial rasp. "They didn't die in an ambush, Sofía. They were offered up, a sacrifice." The word was a physical blow. Sacrifice. It confirmed every dark, unspoken suspicion she had ever harbored. "Where are you?" she demanded, grabbing her car keys. "A place outside of San Baltazar Yatsachi. You take the old road, the one they closed in '98. There's a cantina, the Hummingbird's Rest. Don't ask questions. Don't use your name. Just ask for the man who is waiting for the mountain to fall. Hurry, Nina. The ones who enforced the pact. They know I'm breathing heavy, and they've always been good at silencing things." He hung up, leaving Sofía alone with the profound, shattering sound of an oath broken in midair. The drive from Mexico City to the rugged heart of Oaxaca was a blur of highway asphalt, giving way to treacherous, winding mountain paths. The landscape transformed from smog-choked modernity to a primordial world of mist-shrouded peaks and deep ravines, the very terrain that had swallowed 14 lives. Sofía drove her battered sedan, the fear a constant metallic taste in her mouth, overshadowed by the fierce, cold clarity of purpose. She wasn't chasing a ghost. She was hunting down the final piece of her family's history. San Baltazar Yatsachi was a village clinging to the side of a cliff, suspended between the clouds and the valley floor. The cantina, El Descanso del Colibrí, the Hummingbird's Rest, was little more than a corrugated iron shack with a single bare bulb, casting a feeble yellow glow on the dirt road. Elías was sitting at a splintered wooden table in the darkest corner. He was not a man. He was a ruin. The uniform pictures showed a coiled, lean soldier, but this man was skeletal, his skin like old parchment stretched over sharp bone. His eyes, however, burned with an undiminished, terrifying lucidity. They were the eyes of a man who had seen hell and carried it inside for 4 decades. He didn't look up when Sofía sat down. He only pushed a chipped coffee cup toward her. "You shouldn't have come so fast." 40 years is long enough to wait, Elías, she said, keeping her voice low. "Tell me everything. Who broke the pact first?" "The pact was broken the moment the first lie was spoken at the debriefing," Elías corrected, his voice raspy. "But the silence was a wall, built with fear and blood. They told us if we spoke, the families of the fallen would suffer, that we would be responsible for the chaos. We were 2 young, broken soldiers, Nina. We obeyed." He took a labored sip of his water, his hand shaking violently. "You need to understand the context. It wasn't just an infantry patrol. We were the shadow unit, 14 of the best. Our mission was clandestine, Deep penetration to verify a rumored illegal shipment route, high-value arms, probably bound for the cartels or a political opposition group. This was the dark underbelly of a high-stakes local election. Elias leaned closer, his breath smelling of decay and old mountain air. The commander, your father, he had a reputation. Honest. Too honest. He kept a field journal, not just mission logs, but notes, thoughts. He saw things the generals didn't want seen. What did he see? Sofía urged. Elías paused, his eyes flicking nervously toward the entrance, though the only other person in the cantina was the silent, watchful proprietor, wiping the same counter repeatedly. We were a pawn. We were sent to the Puente Roto, the broken bridge, a known choke point. We weren't supposed to secure it. We were supposed to die there. They needed 14 heroes to fall so a major operation could be justified, an operation that would put a certain general, a very important general, in power over that whole territory. He explained the night of the supposed ambush. It was silent. Too silent. We were ready, fortified. Your father had us dig in deep, but the attack didn't come from the front. It came from above, from the sky. Elias finally began to speak with a terrifying fluency, pouring 40 years of suppressed trauma into the dimly lit space. It was just before dawn, freezing cold. We were watching the main pass, then Commander Morales heard something. Not boots, not an engine, a rotor, a helicopter. Elias emphasized the word, his eyes wide with the memory. But it wasn't the enemy's. It was one of ours, an unmarked transport. The shock of seeing a friendly aircraft, not an enemy militia, had caused the first second of hesitation, a second that cost 13 men their lives. It wasn't an attack. It was an execution, Nina. The helicopter didn't land, it hovered, and it dropped something. Not men, incendiaries and a chemical agent. Not gas, but something that melted the earth and stuck to skin. It was silent, effective, and untraceable. The ground units below, our supposed support, were waiting. They were wearing full NBC gear. They weren't there to rescue us. They were there to make sure no one was left. The unit was incinerated, the chemical ensuring that any remains would be unrecognizable, and the event easily dismissed as a massive, unlucky guerrilla strike. The official report would later cite experimental enemy ordnance, a story designed to obfuscate the origin of the attack. Your father. He knew the moment the helicopter came. He didn't waste a second. He screamed the code word, Sierra Treche, and threw me into the ravine. I had a severe head wound from the blast, but I wasn't burned. I was in a crevice, unconscious, buried under rock and dirt. They missed me in the sweep. Elias paused, rubbing a spot on his forearm where the skin was strangely taut and shiny. But before he threw me, he handed me a single item. He said, "If you live, show the general this. If you die, let it die with you." It was his judgment, a final act of resistance. What was it? Sofía asked, her voice raw. She felt sick, the magnitude of the betrayal crushing the air from her lungs. Not an ambush, a massacre sanctioned by their own flag. A notebook, his journal, small, waterproof. He wrote everything in code, the general's name, the coordinates of the supply route the military was actually protecting, and the log of the helicopter's call sign, which he'd somehow gotten from a scrambled radio transmission moments before the blast. Elias was the only witness. He had crawled out, half dead, days later. He tried to report it, but the moment he mentioned the helicopter, the system shut down. He was placed under armed guard, interrogated, and threatened. The Pact of Silence wasn't a gentleman's agreement. It was an ultimatum delivered by men with shiny boots and cold eyes, led by the very man your father was supposed to report to, General Raúl Zafiro. Zafiro wasn't just a general, Nina. He became a political heavyweight. He used the Oaxaca incident as a springboard, consolidating power, purging his rivals. Your father and the 14 were the sacrificial blood that stained the path to Zafiro's ascendancy. As Elias spoke the name General Raúl Zafiro, a wave of cold reality hit Sofía. Zafiro was not a historical footnote, he was a titan. He had retired years ago, a revered figure known for his strong hand policy, and was now a powerful, well-connected industrialist with heavy ties to the current administration. Exposing Zafiro meant challenging the deepest roots of the Mexican establishment. "The journal, where is it?" Sofía pressed. Elias finally raised his head. His eyes narrowed with calculation. The fire of a soldier briefly rekindled. I never broke the pact for 40 years. Not because of Zafiro's threats, but because I couldn't risk the evidence being destroyed. The truth had to be saved for a time when it could burn the house down. That time is now. He reached beneath his faded poncho, his movement slow and agonizing, and pulled out a small metallic object. It wasn't the journal. It was an old heavy Zippo lighter, engraved with the 37th Infantry insignia. The journal is hidden. The location is the only secret I guard, and I'm not giving it to the daughter of the commander, no offense. I'm giving it to a historian, someone who knows how to use it, not just mourn with it. He tapped the lighter. This is the first key. It has a hidden compartment, a micro SD card. It contains a document, a single page. It's my written confession, signed and dated, detailing the entire chain of events. A final verifiable account. He placed the lighter in her palm. It felt cold, heavy, and infinitely valuable. Just as Sofía closed her fingers around the metal, the small cantina's bare bulb flickered violently, plunging the corner into shadow. The proprietress, who had been silently wiping the counter, suddenly stopped moving. A new car, a black heavily tinted SUV, slid to a silent stop outside. Even the mountain air seemed to hold its breath. "He's been watching me," Elías whispered, his voice a dry, panicked sound. "I made a contact 3 days ago, a mistake. They knew I was talking." Two large men in cheap, ill-fitting dark suits, their movements too fluid for civilians, entered the cantina. They didn't look around. They looked straight at Elías's corner. Silencers. That was the only word that flashed in Sofía's mind. They were here not to negotiate, but to enforce the final clause of the pact. "You have to run, Niña," Elías urged, pushing her violently toward the back door, a tattered curtain leading to the mountainside latrine. "The journal is hidden at the old garrison. The code is the date of the capture of Oaxaca, the one your father studied so much. 1812, November 25, remember it. Go." Sofía didn't argue. She darted through the curtain, the sounds of heavy footsteps and a stifled, dreadful scuffle erupting behind her. She pushed open the flimsy wooden door and scrambled out into the pre-dawn gloom. The mountain air was thin and frigid, but Sofía's blood was pounding hot in her ears. She heard a shout, not Elías, but one of the pursuers, and the unmistakable, sickening sound of a muffled blow. She didn't look back. She clambered down the steep, rocky slope behind the cantina, relying on instinct and adrenaline. She reached her car, parked discreetly 100 meters down the road, and fumbled with the key, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped the precious Zippo lighter. She managed to start the engine, throwing the car into a hard, dusty U-turn. As she sped away, she saw a terrible silhouette in her rearview mirror. The two men dragging a slumped figure back inside El Descanso del Colibrí. Elías's final act of defiance had cost him his life, but it had bought Sofía precious seconds. She drove blindly for an hour, pushing the sedan past its limits on the unforgiving dirt roads, before pulling over near a remote, unnamed village. Her stomach churned. She had the key, the confession, and the code. Now she needed the main evidence, the journal, hidden at the old garrison. She retrieved the Zippo. With a trembling finger, she found the minute seam Elías had pointed to and slid the panel open. Inside, nestled in foam, was a tiny micro SD card. She pulled it out and inserted it into the old laptop she always carried. The file was simple, lasttestament.txt. The confession, signed with Elías's full name and service number, was brief but devastating. It detailed the helicopter attack, the chemical agents, the names of the two high-ranking officers present in NBC gear, and the explicit command given by a voice on the radio, identified by Elías as General Zafiro. "Ensure complete silence. Operation Phoenix requires martyrs." Tears blurred Sofía's vision. Her father wasn't ambushed. He was executed to fuel a political myth. The confirmation, though agonizing, fueled a fierce, cold rage. She had to finish what Elías started. The old garrison was a deserted military outpost, abandoned since the 1970s and located deep in the Central Valley, a place Sofía knew only from archival maps. She drove for another 4 hours, the sun now high, her exhaustion battling the adrenaline. The garrison was a crumbling, ghost-ridden structure of gray stone and broken concrete. The main barracks were gutted, the parade ground overgrown. She found the place Elias had specified on the map she had memorized from her research, the old armory safe, buried beneath the floor of the commander's private study. She dug for 2 hours using a spade she'd brought, a historian's tool, now repurposed as an excavator of graves. The sweat and grime coated her, but finally, she hit steel. The safe was small, bolted directly into the foundation. It had a simple combination dial. She remembered Elias's final choked words, 1812, November 25, the date of the capture of Oaxaca during the Mexican War of Independence, a historical event her father had been obsessed with, often studying military maneuvers from that battle. She twisted the dial, her hands steady now. 25. The lock clicked. Inside the safe, wrapped in an oilskin cloth, was the journal. It was small, bound in dark leather, and smelling faintly of chemicals and old leather. Sofia's hands trembled as she opened it. The entries weren't linear, but coded. Pages were filled with maps overlaid with cryptic symbols, numerical sequences, and dates that matched political events from the early 1980s. The code was complex, but her father had provided the key in the front matter, a simple Caesar cipher shifting based on the first digit of the current date. It took her 5 agonizing hours, working under the harsh glare of her car's dome light, cross-referencing her own historical notes, but she finally cracked the core of the entries. Entry, 1983 11-23, code S7. The general is moving the pieces, not against the enemy, against us. The route we are to secure is the new pipeline for the Venezuelan shipment. We are a smokescreen. Zafiro's price for his silence is control of the northern passage. The 14 are disposable. Entry, 1983 11-24, code G3. I know it's coming. The ambush is a fabrication. The Aguila chopper is scheduled to make a dry run at 0400, not dry. I've sent a scrambled log to redacted name, but he won't believe it. I have to create a contingency. Rivera is my contingency. If I fail, he must survive. Entry, 1983 11-25, 0345, code Z9. We hear the rotor. It's him, Zafiro's hand. If this journal reaches the light, it burns down the house. The truth about the 14 is the truth about the regime. I'm sorry, mi amor. I did what was right. Now I prepare to do what is necessary. Sierra Treche. The journal was more than a confession. It was a ledger of betrayal. It contained not only the specific details of the massacre, but also documented Zafiro's entire operation, the names of corrupt officials who sanctioned the arms shipment, the coordinates of hidden caches that later became the basis for Zafiro's industrial empire, and even detailed bank transfers laundered through military procurement contracts. The incident of the 14 soldiers was the horrific single event that masked a decade of profound corruption at the highest levels. Sofía sat back, the leather journal heavy in her lap. Elias had given her a sword. Now she had to wield it. But the evidence had to be authenticated, corroborated by independent records, and released in a way that couldn't be instantly dismissed as a disgruntled civilian's fantasy. As dusk settled, Sofía was preparing to leave the deserted garrison when a chilling thought struck her. Elias had said they knew he was breathing heavy. They had moved on him the moment he made a suspicious contact. If they knew he was talking to someone, they would trace him back to the commander's family. They would be searching the logical places. They would be coming here. She was right. A low, distant sound, the unmistakable drone of an approaching engine on the unpaved road, broke the mountain silence. It was slow, deliberate, and approaching the garrison. Sofía scrambled. She shoved the journal and the micro SD card into a hidden pouch in her backpack. She couldn't run. She was exposed. She had to hide, and she had to observe who was coming. She squeezed into the narrow, dust-choked space beneath a collapsed section of the armory wall, covering herself with dry weeds and debris. The black SUV that had been at the cantina pulled up onto the parade ground. 2 figures emerged, the same men who had silenced Elias, but this time they were not alone. A third man, older, impeccably dressed in an expensive linen suit that looked utterly incongruous in the ruins, stepped out. His hair was silver, his posture military, and his face, even from a distance, even in the fading light, was unforgettable. The sharp, predatory gaze was unmistakable, etched into the public memory from 40 years of television interviews and political summits. General Raúl Zafiro. He walked slowly, purposefully across the broken concrete to the commander's study, the ruin of the armory. Rivera was a fool, Zafiro said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet air, cold and utterly devoid of emotion. A useful fool, but a fool nonetheless. He died with his memory intact, which is all that matters. Now, find the object. One of the men pointed to the fresh earth where Sofía had dug. Someone was here, General, recently. Zafiro surveyed the disturbed soil where the safe had been, his lips curling into a tight, terrible smile. Hector's little obsession, the journal. He was always one for documentation. It seems El Cachorro broke his silence just in time to pass the torch. Find the woman. Sofía Morales, she has the book, and now she knows my truth. Zafiro stood over the hole, a monument to the power he had built on the bones of 14 men. He didn't seem angry, only mildly annoyed, like a gardener finding a weed. She is a historian, Zafiro mused, turning to his guards. She will try to use history to defeat us. That is her weakness. We will make sure this story, like its author and its witness, never makes it into the archives. Sofía felt a tremor of pure terror run through her, but it was immediately replaced by a steely determination. She wasn't just holding her father's journal anymore. She was holding the key to bringing down a titan who still commanded the loyalty of killers. The fight was not a historical debate. It was a deadly, immediate war. The two men began their search of the surrounding area. Sofía pulled out her phone, the screen showing zero signal. This deep in the mountains, she was isolated, hunted. She clutched the journal and the Zippo. Elías had completed his mission. Now, the pact of silence was truly broken, and the truth, hidden for 40 years in the mountains of Oaxaca, was finally ready to be carried back to the world, no matter the cost. Sofía waited beneath the collapsed wall for over 2 hours, breathing shallowly, listening to the rustle of the search party closing in and then receding as Zafiro's men, whom the general referred to simply as the unit, realized she had fled in the car. The darkness was absolute when she finally dared to move. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. She knew the rules of the game had changed. This wasn't about filing a report. It was a matter of survival. General Zafiro, a man capable of murdering his own soldiers for political gain, would not hesitate to eliminate her. Her only advantage was the journal itself, the sheer weight of its evidence, and the element of surprise. Zafiro was accustomed to operating in the shadows of the past. She needed to expose him in the unforgiving glare of the present. Her immediate plan was simple: escape the mountains, reach the capital, and contact her only trustworthy ally, a veteran investigative journalist named Eduardo Lalo Rojas, known for his relentless pursuit of military corruption. Lalo didn't scare easily, and he had the platform to amplify the truth. She retrieved her car, drove slowly and carefully, and managed to find a small, forgotten secondary road leading out of the valley, bypassing the likely checkpoints. The moment her phone signaled 1 bar of patchy service, she sent Lalo a single cryptic text: Oaxaca, Nov 25/14. I have the ledger, they know. Need immediate secure extraction point. She didn't wait for a reply. She deleted the text and threw the phone into a stream, replacing it with a burner phone she had purchased weeks ago as a precaution. The next 12 hours were a grinding test of endurance, fear, and paranoia. Every car she passed was a threat. Every shadow in her periphery was a member of the unit. She felt the massive, invisible machinery of General Zafiro's power humming around her, closing off the exits. Sofía reached the outskirts of Puebla by dawn, stopping at a remote gas station to change clothes and clean the grime from the garrison off her hands and face. She looked like a ghost, but she felt hard, honed by the cold steel of the truth. The burner phone finally chimed. It was Lalo. His text was simple. The museum, 1400 hours. Go to the Zapotec exhibit. Wait by the warrior statue. I will find you. Do not bring the ledger. The museum. A perfect choice. Public, crowded, neutral territory, and fittingly, a place dedicated to the history her father had died trying to protect. At 1:45 p.m., Sofía walked into the grand, cool halls of the National Museum of Anthropology. The massive Zapotec exhibit, dedicated to the ancient culture of Oaxaca, felt like the heart of the country, a space where history was both revered and sanitized. She sat on a bench near the imposing clay statue of a warrior, her backpack tight against her chest. The leather journal and the micro SD card were in a sealed compartment of the bag, close enough to defend, small enough to conceal. Lalo Rojas, when he finally approached, didn't look like a hero. He was a portly man in a rumpled suit, his face etched with the weariness of too many late nights chasing shadows. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and held a professional skepticism that Sofía desperately needed. "Sofía, you look terrible," Lalo murmured, sitting beside her, seemingly absorbed by the warrior statue. "And you risked too much coming here. The general is not a retired man. He's an institution. What do you have?" Sofía told him about Elías Rivera, the call, the cantina, the pact of silence, and the brutal confirmation of the execution at the broken bridge. She kept her voice flat, clinical, presenting the facts like a historian, not a grieving daughter. She did not mention Zafiro by name yet. "The helicopter," Lalo repeated, scratching his chin. "That changes everything. The official report insisted on a large, well-armed militia. A chopper implies military command and control. What about the proof? You said you have the ledger." "I have two things," Sofía said, her voice dropping. "First, a micro SD card. It has Elías Rivera's signed, detailed confession. It verifies the identity of the unit that conducted the execution and the name of the general who gave the order. Second, a journal, my father's field ledger, that documents Zafiro's entire operation. The arms trafficking, the political payoffs, the real reason the 14 had to be removed. It's all in code, but I have the key." Lalo's skepticism evaporated, replaced by a fierce electric focus. "Zafiro, the old lion. He built his empire on that ambush. He is untouchable. If this is true, Sofía, this isn't a story. It's a political earthquake. We need to be careful. They will be watching me too. We can't use my office, my paper, or any secure channel they can trace." "I know," Sofía replied. "That's why I need you to find an independent military expert. A retired major, perhaps. Someone clean who can authenticate the call signs and the ordnance references in the journal. I will handle the political contacts. We need to hit him with the full story all at once before he can deploy the military machine against us." They spent the next hour planning, communicating in hushed tones, surrounded by the silent judging figures of ancient Zapotec royalty. Lalo gave Sofía a key to a safe house, a small anonymous apartment owned by a recently deceased relative, and stressed the importance of remaining invisible. "Do not leave that apartment. Do not use the internet. Keep the journal separate from the confession. I'll make the calls." As Lalo stood to leave, he hesitated. "Sofía, if you release this, you are not just destroying Zafiro. You are exposing the complicity of half the current ruling class. Are you ready for that war?" Sofía looked at the Zapotec warrior, its face resolute. "My father died doing what was necessary. I am a historian, Lalo. I will make sure the historical record is correct. I am ready." Over the next few days, Sofía was a prisoner in the small safe house, meticulously cataloging and translating every single entry in her father's journal. She photocopied the pages, annotated the codes, and cross-referenced the names against Lalo's background checks. The depth of Zafiro's corruption was staggering. The massacre of the 14 soldiers wasn't an isolated atrocity. It was the foundational crime upon which a modern financial and political dynasty was built. Lalo, meanwhile, worked the shadows. He used his old network to contact a retired major, a former rival of Zafiro known for his integrity, who, under the promise of anonymity, confirmed the terrifying implication of the journal's references to the helicopter, the call sign, and the incendiaries. The major provided Lalo with technical data that would turn the circumstantial evidence into irrefutable fact. "The major confirms it, Sofía," Lalo said during a brief, urgent call from a different burner phone. "The ordnance described by your father and Elías matches a highly restricted, experimental foreign agent the military was not supposed to possess. The mere possession of that journal is treason in their eyes. We have everything we need." But the general was not idle. Zafiro was a master chess player, and the disappearance of Elías Rivera had signaled the end of the match. He had placed his pieces. Lalo's contact, the retired major, was found the next morning, dead in a staged car accident on a rural road. A clear message. The general knew Lalo was investigating, and Zafiro's reach was faster than Lalo's network. The second blow came harder. Sofía received a single devastating package at the safe house, a small, unmarked box delivered by a quiet courier. Inside was an object she recognized instantly, the small gold locket her mother always wore, containing a picture of her father. The locket was untouched, but pinned to the velvet lining was a photograph, a recent clear picture of Sofia's mother, sitting alone in her garden, taken within the last 24 hours. The message was clear. We know who you are, and we know where you are vulnerable. Zafiro had found the safe house. He hadn't sent the unit yet, but the warning was a prelude to execution. He was giving her a chance to retreat and surrender the journal. But Sofía had inherited her father's iron will. The journal was more important than her fear. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. But Sofía fought it back with the cold, pure anger that had been simmering for 40 years. She had to accelerate the plan. There was no time for an official release, no time for media vetting. She needed to make the story public, immediately and irrevocably. She risked a call to Lalo. They found my mother. Zafiro knows where I am. The major is dead. We go live now. No more planning. We need a platform that can't be shut down. You have to arrange a direct broadcast, a live stream, something that hits the international wire before they can pull the plug. Lalo was shaken but agreed. The paper is too compromised. I have an independent digital news channel, an activist group. They'll run the story live, but it has to be tonight. The evidence needs to be presented by you, the daughter of the commander. It adds the moral weight. Tonight it is, Sofía said. She quickly grabbed the journal, the micro SD, and her laptop, tossing the burner phone and the car key into a fire. She left the safe house on foot, blending into the teeming chaos of the city, using her historian's knowledge of old tunnels and back alleys to escape the grid of surveillance she knew Zafiro would impose. Her destination was a small, dusty studio in a rundown district, Lalo's Contact, a collective of independent journalists known as La Crónica Ciega, the Blind Chronicle. She arrived at 10 p.m. The small studio was frenetic, powered by nervous energy and fear. Lalo was waiting, along with a skeleton crew of young, determined activists. We're setting up the live feed, Lalo said, his face pale. We are going to stream to 20 different global servers simultaneously. Once you start talking, the truth is out of the bottle, but you'll be the most hunted woman in the country. Sofía opened her backpack and placed the journal on the small wooden desk. The dark leather was the only solid object in the shaky room. I won't just talk, Lalo, she said, her voice steady. I'll read the final entry, and I'll show the world the original log of the Águila helicopter, the one my father risked his life to record. At 11:30 p.m., the broadcast went live. The small, grainy feed carried a simple title, The Truth About the 14. Sofía, seated alone at the desk, looked directly into the camera. She didn't rely on dramatics, only on facts. She introduced herself, Commander Héctor Morales' daughter, and then introduced the witness, Elías El Cachorro Rivera, now dead, silenced just hours after breaking his pact. She started with the technical details, the coordinates of the broken bridge, the date of the capture of Oaxaca as the code key, the chemical ordnance. Then, she inserted the micro SD card and displayed Elias's confession, the stark, simple text filling the screen. The truth began to burn. The 14 soldiers of Oaxaca did not die in an ambush, Sofía declared, her voice ringing with finality. They were not killed by separatists or cartels. They were executed by their own commanders, under the explicit order of the then Lieutenant General Raúl Zafiro, as a political sacrifice to secure a lucrative arms and drug trafficking route. They were not heroes. They were martyrs to corruption. She pulled out her father's journal and opened it to the final chilling entry, reading the coded lines and then providing the translation. She concluded with her father's desperate final words. The truth about the 14 is the truth about the regime. The internet exploded. The sheer volume of the evidence, coupled with the personal, heartbreaking narrative, gave the story an immediacy that bypassed the official media gatekeepers. Governments were notified, military watchdogs mobilized, and the name General Raúl Zafiro became synonymous with treason. Minutes after the broadcast began, the studio door burst open. It wasn't the unit. It was the federal police. But they weren't there for Sofía. The global outrage was instantaneous, too massive to ignore. The federal police, seeing the feed, seeing the evidence, had been dispatched to secure the only two living people who could testify against Zafiro, Sofía Morales and Eduardo Rojas. As the police secured the perimeter, Lalo looked at Sofía, sweat dripping from his face but his eyes shining with triumph. You did it, historian. You changed the archive. Sofía looked down at the journal, now officially documented, witnessed, and immortalized on the global wire. It was no longer a personal tragedy, it was a public record. The pact of silence was shattered forever. The general's 40-year reign of truth was over. But Sofía knew the war had just begun. Zafiro was exposed, but he was not yet captured. The general, the man who had ordered the murder of 14 soldiers, was now desperate, cornered, and perhaps more dangerous than ever. The story was no longer about the dead. It was about the living who would fight to ensure the dead received justice. Sofía Morales, the daughter of a sacrificed commander and the last custodian of the ledger of betrayal, was now the main target in a war against the most powerful man in the country. The mountain had fallen, and the avalanche had just started.